My father disappeared when I was young. It was the only tragedy of my childhood. Sort of news that spread like a disease through the small town where I lived. There was more than one teacher who stuttered to halt on my last name and looked at me with their eyes overflowing with sympathy, or they'd pull me aside to tell me how good of a man he was. I'm not certain exactly how old I was because my mother refused to speak of him at all unless she was drunk to hell and back. Even then, her words barely made sense. I was small enough, though, that the only thing I remember of him is the warmth of his voice and a slice of a smile. He lived in a mansion of a house, by my father's salary as a professor, but mostly by my mother's trust fund. My parents had been planning on filling it up with a whole host of children, but with just my mother and I, all the empty space was terrifying. I had nightmares as a teenager about walking into the abandoned corridors of my house and never finding my way back to that small pocket of rooms that we maintained as our living space. My father was a professor, one of architecture at a prestigious university. The sort of school that everyone recognizes by name, and he drove an hour to work every day and an hour home. My mother and his friends tried to convince him to move to the city, but he said that he preferred the slowness and solitude of a more rural life. He was kind to a fault. Always ready with a joke. In a crisis, he always knew what to do. I know this because in the years after his disappearance, I would regularly get accosted by strangers and held captive while they told me long-winded stories about him. I left as soon as I could. I was 17 years old. I didn't go back for 2 decades. But my mother died last month of a heart attack, and as their only child, the duty fell on me to clear out the house. My mother had forbidden me from going into his office. She kept it intact, sealed like a shrine to him, out of some sort of morbid respect. I left it for last. The light didn't work, so I opened the curtains, covering the floor-to-ceiling windows and one wall, coughing at the explosion of dust, and worked by the light of the sun. There was so much of him in that room, and the way that he decorated, and the neat, loopy annotations filling many of his books. His desk was an oak behemoth, the weight of it wearing holes into the carpet, so I didn't want to deal with it until the smaller items had been packed up. When I finally got around to the desk, I was surprised to find that the drawers were mostly empty. The only thing inside them was a stack of letters shoved off in a corner. They were addressed to Caleb Hawthorne, my father's closest friend, and a fellow professor of architecture at a different college. According to one of my neighbors, an older woman who couldn't shut up to save her life, my father had enjoyed the charm of written communication, even though he and everyone that he knew had easy access to phones. The paper was yellowed with age. It felt brittle when I picked it up. I've transcribed their content below. The letters appear to have been sent back to my father after arriving at their destination. September 2nd, 1995. Dear Caleb, I must admit it's a surprise to hear from you so soon. I assume you'd be kept busy by your new son for a couple of months at least. I remember the days of having a newborn, and I truly do not miss it. Still, I wish the best to you and your wife, and hope that the sleep deprivation has not yet stolen your wits. When we last spoke, your neurons were already struggling. I'd hate for you to lose the remaining few. As always, please remember that if you need me, I can be there within a day. Once you've settled in, my family would love to come see you. My son's been asking about his Uncle Caleb. We could plan for Christmas, perhaps. As to your inquiries about my happiness at my university, rest assured that I am very pleased with my current job, and if you wish to claim me for your own architectural department, you will have to try much harder than that. There's something I would like to get your advice on, however. It concerns one of my students by the name of James Bellsmith. He is by far one of the most promising students that I've encountered. And although this is the first year that I have taught him, my colleagues have only spoken positively about him. As you know, my class is mostly focused on practical design. My students apply the concepts they've learned in other classes and make blueprints for buildings that are both structurally sound and visually interesting. It's bad for a professor to show favoritism, of course, but I was excited to review Mr. Bellsmith's first project. I had heard so much about his capabilities and seen his intellect firsthand in the thoughtful responses that he gave to my questions, even if he was a bit spacey. He turned in his blueprints very early, barely 3 weeks after I first explained the assignment. It was the first to end up on my desk, and although I usually wait for all the projects to be turned in and grade them all at once, I didn't want to wait. He turned in a blueprint for an observatory. It was an unusual choice for a first project, but on first glance, he seemed to have done exceptional work. It was mostly of one vast room with a recessed space for an impressive telescope and a domed roof that could open or close easily. A ring of smaller rooms arced around the circular walls, and Mr. Bellsmith indicated they'd be used to give presentations, contain various informational artifacts, and books about space, and store small telescopes. He provided detailed information about the mechanism that would open the roof, as well as the stained glass windows that would be in each of the outer rooms. Have you ever seen those illusion pictures made up of dozens of circular lines that make it look like the image is moving? I was obsessed with those as a kid, and I had a couple of books of them. I thought it was magic, and nothing could convince me otherwise. Even when my mother took my book and tore it in half to show me that it really was just paper. Mr. Bellsmith's blueprints reminded me of that. The more I looked at it, the more I became convinced that it was wriggling on the page, like maggots caught in a fishhook. The lines squirming ever so slightly out of place. The dimensions looked off. I checked over his math twice, and it was factually correct, but I couldn't shake the impression that the observatory was somehow too large for itself. It physically hurt to look at. It made my eyes ache and my head pulse with pain. I know that doesn't make any sense. I know how it sounds. When I told my wife about it, she put her hand on my forehead and asked if I was feeling unwell. I called him into my office to discuss the project, once I had had time to calm down. He was smirking the whole time that we talked, sunk into his chair without a care in the world. I put the blueprint down in front of him and demanded answers, with probably not as much professionalism as I should have employed. He looked down at it in confusion. He asked me what the hell I was talking about. There was no remaining sign of the unsettling creation that it had been before, just a regular, if very technical, proficient diagram. But I swear to you, Caleb, that observatory was straining at the seams of its blueprint, bloating in the way of dead animals filled with gas. I'm asking you, please, to pay heed to our long friendship and trust me when I say that there was something truly wrong. November 15th, 1995. Dear Caleb, all right, I get it. You don't believe me. You didn't have to be so cruel about it. The president of my university agrees with you, by the way. He got all pitying and asked if I needed a vacation. I took it, obviously, because I'm not good to turn down free time off, and my students didn't really need me for the next few weeks. They've been working on their next project, and I'm hoping that Bellsmith will settle down without me there to terrorize. Have you ever had a student that hates you? No, I don't mean they dislike you, your teaching style, or think that you give too much work, or don't like how stern you can be. I mean, they really hate you. They want you to be dead, and they would do it themselves if they could. You wake up in the middle of the night to a sound coming from down the stairs, and you're frozen with fear that they finally come for you, and even your wife, sleeping peacefully beside you, she isn't safe. I think Bellsmith hates me like that. Sometimes when he looks at me, there's so much fury in his eyes that it seems like he'd burn the whole country down if it meant that I went with it. And my wife thinks I'm being ridiculous. And maybe I am. I don't know anymore. He turned in 2 more blueprints. They didn't have the same horrible quality the first did, but they were both labyrinthian, with twisting corridors, dead ends that seemed to just appear. Both were designed to be huge, spiraling structures, one of a library, the other of a towering apartment building. They were against every principle of good architecture. They'd be counterintuitive to navigate at best, and downright dangerous at worst, leaving someone to wander for hours without seeing any hint of an exit. The safety and building codes would be a nightmare, and I doubt they'd ever be approved to actually be built. Parts of the building stuck out at odd angles, hanging far out over the rest. Probably come crashing down at the first hint of wind. The worst part is that they were still beautiful, despite all of that. There was something undeniably compelling about them. I've been dreaming about his blueprints. I'm in his buildings every night in a different area every time, and I'm running. There's no transition between being awake and being asleep for me. I'm in my bed, and then I'm sprinting at full speed down a hallway like I've been dropped into a run that's already been happening for a very long time. I race through the labyrinth, and it never ends. There's always more ground beneath my feet, new places to go. There's something chasing me, always just a couple of steps behind. I can hear its claws scratching against the stone, hear the wheeze of its breath. Sometimes it gets so close that I can feel its cold teeth graze my back. I don't think I can do this anymore, Caleb. Is that spot in your university still open? January 23rd, 1995. You bastard. Utter fucking bastard. I'm not fucking delusional. And if you try to take my son away from me, I'll make you regret it. I run the mazes while I'm awake now. I'll blink and suddenly I'll be inside one of the blueprints with the monster inches behind. When it scratches me, I bleed, and I keep bleeding once the labyrinth fades away and I'm back at home. I know Bellsmith's address. It's quite simple to get from the university database when you know what you're doing. He lives alone, which makes it easier. I've got my gloves, my old rifle, and a mask to cover my face. This is an awful thing to admit to you, and I'm sorry for that, but I need you to know. If this goes poorly, I need you to make sure that my son is okay. Tell him that I love him. It comes down to this. I cannot allow Bellsmith to build any of his blueprints. I've seen past his smile, and he's empty inside. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video or for listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. And as always, I want to give a very big thank you to everybody who supports me over at Patreon. That's patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. I cannot thank you guys enough. You guys have been there when I'm struggling like I have over the past year, and it sincerely helps me stay alive. So thank you guys so much for being supporters. That goes for everybody who was down in the description, as well as AcidSystem, BallarmsTheRat, Blake Rattler, Mendoza, Brenna, BrimstonePandemonium, Caltuna, Chainsmoker Dealer, ChicagoHitman, CoryxKenshin, CronutHut508, CrusaderChocobo, CursepoxPrimarch, Dakota Best, Poulsen, Dante Kinkade, Kraus, Ellie Hutmire, Enchanted Buns, Estebean, Gemma, Halsey, HIDive's nephew, Jerry, Hour Minutes Seconds Time, Jay Keems, Jedis Pet, Jordan Humble, King Crab, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Old Penguin, Peaceful Buddha, Psychomel, Red Shadowcat, Remember the Sun, Rinku Star, Salty Surprise, Samara Line, Seclude, Simba's Bloody Mojo, Sky Harbor, Smiley the Psychotic, Sullyman, Tali Sue, the Chavez Brothers. Thank you so much. And honestly, thank you to everybody, even those guys that are in there for just $1. It really helps me out. Once again, that's patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. Or if you guys like to just listen, honestly, that helps me out a lot too. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And sweet dreams.